Hi, girls. Miss you. I wish we could be together practicing, but I know that we will be together again soon, and I'm excited for that. But I also know that the Lord's using this time in our lives to be able to serve others. Honestly, what a great opportunity we have in front of us. And I really think that the Lord does use these types of things for His good. And so I am excited to see what good comes out of this and just how much you guys learn and grow through this. And I'm so, so excited to see you guys in the future. But I do have the privilege of doing devotions today. And today we're going to be reading out of Romans 12, 14, and 15. So I'm going to read it to you guys really quickly. It's a pretty short verse, but it does hold a lot of weight. And it says, "Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep." So I think this whole chapter, as you guys have probably heard, 9 through 21, is talking about, it's titled Marks of a True Christian. And what Paul's doing here to the Romans is he's laying out ways that we as believers are to act different. Now, we act different than non-believers around us, but we also, more importantly, act different than who we once were before Christ. And so we're called essentially to be different. And that might not mean that, your sinful nature is completely gone. We still have a sinful nature within us because we are still made of flesh. But I think that these verses are calling us to continue to fight against that and continue to seek the Lord before we listen to our flesh. And I think that it's really cool because when we see the word bless, that's not just something that's an action, right? That's a heart and a mind posture towards someone. So it's really easy in our lives, someone does something that upsets you. It's pretty, you might, want to hit them or do something mean to them or gossip about them. And it's pretty easy for us to have enough willpower to not do that because we know that's wrong. We know that people are going to look down on us. But what we can't willpower, if you will, is the change in our heart and our mind to actually want to bless people that persecute us, right? That's not something that we can just have enough self-control to do. That's something that truly only comes from the love that we get from Christ, and that He changes our lives in a way that we are able to change our heart and our mind towards other people and not just our actions. And the second thing I want to point out is that we're also called to be like Christ. And I think about all the times in the gospel as I was reading this, that Christ truly lived out these verses. The first one, He wept with those who wept. The first story that comes to my mind is with Lazarus. It says that Jesus wept once He heard about Lazarus dying. And the cool thing to me is that God knew what was going to happen. Jesus knew that He was going to raise Lazarus from the dead because He was fully God. But He also noticed the weight of the situation. He noticed the sorrow in Lazarus' sisters. He noticed the sorrow in those grieving around him. And He didn't just blow it off and say, "Oh, guys, why are you sad? I'm going to raise him from the dead in a few days." No, He wept with those who wept. And then next, He really did rejoice with those who rejoiced. We see time and time again, and one of my favorite things in the gospel is that Jesus is always breaking bread, drinking wine, laughing, hanging out with friends, and forming true, deep friendships. And He really does rejoice with those who are rejoicing. And then finally, and most importantly, the Lord blesses those who persecute Him. As we see, the most beautiful picture of this is when Jesus is on the cross, right? And as He's being put to death, He says, "Father, forgive these people." And if you think about the weight of that statement, forgiveness is the greatest blessing that Jesus could ever give somebody. And so Him praying for forgiveness for the people that were killing Him was the biggest blessing He could have ever given them. And so I think it's really cool that in saying these things, Paul is reminding us once again to act like Christ. And I think that's something that is a beautiful picture. And then another thing, just kind of more on a practical note, these aren't things that we always feel like doing, right? We don't always feel like weeping with those who rejoice. We don't always feel like blessing those who persecute us. That can be a really hard thing. And so I want to point out really quickly 6 reasons that often make these hard for us to do. So the first reason is selfishness. Sometimes we're honestly just wrapped up in our own selves, in our own pain, in our own time, in our own schedule, in our own friendship, to even stop and see other people rejoicing or other people weeping in order for us to weep or rejoice with them. And so I think that this is a good reminder, again, to just take a step away from ourselves and put others before ourselves. The second reason is that maybe we feel above the emotional life of ordinary people. And this could mean something like, oh, well, I would never let something so petty affect me. I would never weep over that. Or, oh, that's not even a big deal. Why is that person rejoicing? To you, like you might feel like you're above those emotions. And that, again, is selfishness, honestly, is saying I'm better than you, or not putting above someone else's needs above your own. The third, which I know this is one I am incredibly guilty of, is just being hypercritical of the situation. And we see someone rejoicing and we start to criticize that. And we're like, wait, why would you be rejoicing like this, and this? You shouldn't be rejoicing over that. Or, in a few weeks, you're not going to be rejoicing over that. Or same thing with weeping. When someone's weeping, we criticize it. And we're like, oh, well, is that really serious? Or like, should you really be weeping over that? And we're just super critical of it. And then the fourth one is just sometimes we're resentful. There are those people that we don't necessarily get along with, and they get an awesome grade on a test, or, the boy that we like starts having a crush on them and they're really excited about it. And a lot of times we're resentful. The Lord's calling us to set aside our resentment and to put on love, right? Especially for those that we're resentful for, right? And so I think that that's something that we need to be honest about with what's going on in our hearts. And if there is resentment there, that's something we need to repent and pray to God to take away and to give us a posture of love towards that person. Because again, these aren't things that we do on our own. These are heart and mind changes that only come from the Lord. The fifth one and the sixth one are a little bit different, because the first 4 are postures of sin. The fifth and the sixth ones are postures of a deeper emotion, honestly. And so the fifth one might be that we don't have that type of emotional capacity, right? So let's say we grew up in a family that maybe people weren't very emotional. You didn't see how to be joyful. You didn't see how to grieve and feel sadness. And that's something that honestly we have to work through. And we also have to be patient. But that's not something to be proud of necessarily. So I was like this a lot. I could fake emotions when I wanted to, but truly was unable to feel a lot of emotion. And that was something that I was kind of like, oh, well, I don't have a lot of emotions. Like, it's fine. It's cool. I'm that cool girl. But that's not something to be proud of. Because the Lord created us with these beautiful emotions and this beautiful way to connect with others through emotions. And so I challenge you that if you are in that position, to work through that, to maybe ask yourself, why am I not feeling these emotions? Or why, when the people around me feel happy, do I not want to feel happy with them? And why am I not allowing myself to grieve this situation? And maybe if you're having a hard time working through that by yourself, work through that with an adult or a mentor or a teacher that you trust that can help you work through some of that stuff. And the sixth one is maybe honestly you've fallen into some sort of depression and are truly feeling numb. And again, just like the fifth one, that's not a sin. The Lord isn't saying in these verses that if you have depression that you're sinning and you need to rejoice with others and weep with others. That's not what these verses are saying. But if that is the position that you're finding yourself in, that's okay. And it's okay to ask people for help, because at that point, that's a point that you're going to want to find, again, a teacher, a trusted friend, a parent, a mentor, a coach, anyone, and really talk through that stuff with, because a lot of times, especially in high school, that's not just an emotional issue. That can be a hormone issue, that can be a physical issue, thyroid issue. There's a lot of different things that can be. So as you're reading these verses, if that resonates with you, I just really encourage you to talk to somebody about that. But at the end of the day, these 6 reasons that we don't feel like blessing others or rejoicing others or weeping with others, it comes from pride, right? It comes from a feeling of maybe we don't deserve this, or they don't deserve this, or there's a thing that inside of each of us wants to put ourselves above others. And that's why it's hard to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep, especially as women, because we feel like we're always competing with one another, right? We think that, oh, if she did really well on the test and she did better than me, that means I did bad. And that's not true. We can celebrate each other's successes, and we can mourn each other's losses without taking away from our own successes or our own losses. And I think that's something really important that we as women have to remind ourselves constantly. But I just want to bring you back to the fact that this comes from Christ. This isn't something that we can just tell ourselves we're going to do a better job doing. And so I think it's really something that each of us have to continue to ask the Lord to give us these, to give us a spirit of rejoicing with others, to give us a spirit of weeping with others, and to give us a heart and a mind that blesses people that persecute us. And so this week, I just want you guys to think of ways that you can bless those who persecute you, or you can rejoice with those who rejoice, and you can weep with those who weep. And I want you to try to proactively do something about that, to proactively find a friend rejoicing and rejoice with them, to reach out to someone who's grieving, or to bless someone who's persecuted you, who's been rude to you, who has made you feel left out, to truly, truly bless that person. And I think there's a lot of spiritual ways to do that. I also think there's a lot of practical ways to do that. I really think one of the coolest things that the Lord does is, the Holy Spirit kind of keeps the ball rolling. And, the first time we want to, reach out to that person and say, kind of rejoice with them, but we don't feel great about it, or we want to reach out to someone grieving, but we're kind of a little nervous. It just gets easier and easier every time we do it. And so that's why I encourage you guys this week, your challenge, really what I want to challenge you with is to truly do one of those 3 things. Either reach out to someone who's rejoicing and rejoice with them. Reach out to someone who's grieving, or maybe right now feels really anxious or really nervous about all the COVID stuff, and weep with them. And then another one is to try to find someone who you feel like has persecuted you in the past, whether that's been through words or through actions or the way they've made you feel, and try to bless them. I think something that's relevant to our culture right now, and something that I've been trying to do, is a lot of my Black friends that have been mourning or weeping, and just honestly as a nation, we've been weeping a lot of this racial injustice that's been going on and a lot of the racism. And something that I've been trying to do is just to reach out to my Black friends and weep with them and say, I feel your pain, and I'm not going to belittle your pain. I'm not going to say you don't deserve to feel this pain. I'm going to sit with you in this pain and say, how can we make it better? And that's something that I'm working on, and I just encourage you guys to work on something similar in some form of way, to really not just let this be something that you hear, but to let this be something that you do. And with that, I will talk to you guys later. Miss you. See you soon.